Hey there, Brody here with Let's Table It, where we get games like this one to the table. Now, you are here because of this game, ArcheOlogic by Ludonaut Games. This is a puzzle-solving game where each player has a grid and the same amount of the 6 tiles, and players are trying to figure out the correct way that those tiles need to be placed for the game to win. As you play the game, another quest card will be used, and the orientation of the tiles will be different every and each time that you play. The tiles have some markings on them to help you, as there are 4 pink and 4 orange traps that you might figure out where they are or should be on your grid according to the hints that you get. When getting tiles on the grid, there will always be 3 blank spaces somewhere on the grid as well. At the beginning of the game, you will have a starting clue, which gives you a little bit of information to start off with. Now, this might be the one trap located somewhere. You don't know which building or tile it belongs to yet, but you are trying to figure that out during the game. To get the starting clues, you will place the card under the wheel, and you will turn the dial so that the icon clue 1 is in the hexagonal side at the bottom of the wheel. There will be 3 items, 1 coordinate made of 1 letter, another of 1 number, and 1 of the 1 trap symbol. So that tells all players that a trap of the shown type should be located at the intersection of the column and that row. This is the beginning clue that all players should write down. The game includes paper for you to take notes on, as you will need it to deduce and to figure out the correct orientation of the tiles. And you will gain clues on how these things are happening throughout the game. And you need to figure what the correct way is. And if you're playing with new players, you can also help them out, giving them 1 or more additional clues if needed. Players will hide their boards and their sheet of paper with their written clues on that behind the player screen. Now, in the game, there is no specific order to follow. Instead, the position of the pawns on the time track determines which players will be taking a turn. It's your turn when your pawn is in the last spot on the track. You will ask a question using the wheel to gain information, and that uses time moving your pawn forward. You potentially could play several turns in a row if your pawn is still in the last position after your turn. Depending on your question, it will also determine how many spaces that you will move. Also, when moving, you don't take into account the spaces where other players' pawns are located, as there can never be 2 pawns in the same place. Now, when asking your question on your turn, there is a marker that will automatically move 1 step forward clockwise on the city board. The letters refer to the columns on the map, and the numbers refer to the rows. You can choose to keep the selection after moving it once without using extra time. You can choose to move it once more with a cost of 1 more time. Or you can move it on the axis wherever you want on the circle of the coordinates for the cost of 2 time. Again, time will move your pawn forward and let other players potentially take more turns than you do. The other option you will choose in deciding the item that you want to ask about is the building size, or a certain trap, or asking about the location of empty zones. For the cost of 1 time, you can ask how many different buildings are on the selected axis, with the answer being between 1 and 5. For the cost of 1 time, you can ask how many empty zones are there on the selected axis, with the answer being between 0 and 3. For the cost of 2 time, you can ask which boxes of a specific small building, those are the 3 square tiles, are on the selected axis, with an answer being between 0 to 3. For the cost of 2 time, you can ask which trap type are on the selected axis, with an answer being between 0 and 3 symbols. For a cost of 3 time, you can ask which boxes of a specific big building, the ones with 4 squares, are on the selected axis, with the answer being between 0 and 3 symbols. As you can see, some pieces of information require more time than others, and you will add that time used for your question combined with the time used for moving the viewfinder's position together, and you will move your pawn on the track that many spaces. You will then use the ArcheoScope to find your answer. The blue indicator is placed on the position matching the item that you're asking about. The coded card is placed underneath with the axis that you have chosen, which should match the city board that is currently on there right now. This will be a letter or a number. Now your axis should show up on the bottom. Now you should make sure that the card fits well by pushing it so it lines up better with the wheel. It's important to do this so that you don't accidentally gain more information than you're supposed to. So again, the blue selector will show the item that you're asking about, and then the card with the axis selected on it should be shown on the bottom. You will then get an answer like what symbols of the ass shape are located on that row or column. When asking about a building, which are the shapes, 3 holes will either show a risk-free symbol, a fire trap, or a sharp trap for each of the building boxes on that axis. If it's a dot, then that means nothing. When asking about traps, the 3 holes might show a fire trap, a sharp trap, or nothing at all, giving you information on what type of traps are on that axis. No information about the risk-free boxes will be given with this type of question. For a question about the number of different buildings, 2 holes will show with a number shown on one of them, giving you the number of buildings on that row or column for that question. Similarly, when asking about empty zones, 2 holes will appear with one of them showing a number of how many empty zones are there in that row or column. You will write down your answers on your pad as you will most likely want to reference this later in the game. Remember, with the information, you can orientate those tiles differently, so you won't know exactly where your asked tile or thing is located exactly until you gain other clues and put them together. Whenever you think you have figured everything out and where all the tiles should be, at the beginning of your turn, you can flip your pawn over to the other side and move it 4 spaces forward. Again, ignoring spaces where others are located. That's your last turn. You place the tiles on your grid showing your answer, and all other players play until your pawn is again in the last position. When it is back to your turn, you will check the solution shown in the rulebook, and if you are correct, then you win the game. If you are not, well, then you lose and you are out of the game. All other players will then keep playing until someone gets the correct answer. The app can also be used to check if your solution is correct or not, but it doesn't work in place of the archeoscope or the wheel. And well, that's ArcheOlogic. It's a deduction game of asking the best questions to figure out all the information to place those 6 tiles in the specific orientation to win the game. It's a race, but also it will most likely come down to the player who uses efficient turns to gain the most information with what might be the most helpful for them. You will need to open up your brain a little bit with this game because even though you get answers to your questions, you still have to figure out more specifics on how that layout is done. Sometimes you think you have ruled all other options out to later realize something is wrong and you actually just didn't even think of all those other options that could be it. The wheel that you use in the game to ask your questions can be a little confusing at first. Figuring out how to form questions and which types might be more helpful than others. You will also want to use your time wisely moving on the track as well. You skip over all other players, so if you do a big move with a big question, then you will soar further ahead and maybe even further than you think. But making questions that cost little time might let you ask more questions and be able to get more information that way. You will need to determine if little questions, but being able to ask more of those is worth more than asking those bigger questions and moving a big lump sum. After wrapping your head around how this wheel works, then the game feels a lot better and players take quicker turns and the game becomes a smooth machine. It takes a little bit to get this smooth machine working though, because at the beginning the machine is very clanky and jerky and it just becomes a little bit more confusing. Overall, for those who like deduction games, this one gives it to you. After figuring out how the wheel works, I think it works very well and the players can get out of the game what they came to get out of it, which is a race to find an answer before anyone else does. I appreciate the way turns are performed with the track. I like the different symbols used on the tiles that make asking questions worthwhile. But again, the game is about being able to figure out the puzzle before another player does. Remember the focus. Again, this is Brody with Let's Table It, where we get games like this one to the table. Please like and subscribe to our channel. We are new and working hard to bring to you videos like this one so you know if these games are ones you want to get to your own table.